and welcome to our fourth session. In this chapter, we will focus on the integration of economics into the natural sciences, such as physics and biology. There's one subdiscipline of economics which is already practicing this integration, namely ecological economics. Our goal is to expand the scope of its argument considerably. We will examine fundamental principles of physics and biology and explore how they can be applied to economic theory. We will explore the concept of the human niche and relate it to the human economy in the Earth system, involving evolutionary as well as thermodynamic principles. We will then delve more deeply into evolutionary theory and specifically apply it to the human economy and human cultural evolution.
The core of ecological economics is to view the economy as an integral part of the Earth system, including the diverse ecosystems that make up our planet. This view corresponds to another subdiscipline of economics, namely evolutionary economics, that will also form an important basis for our analysis of markets. As an integrating concept, we posit what is called ontological continuity between the different human and non-human domains. Ontological continuity means that human life is embedded in ecosystems which we cohabit with other species. It also stresses the character of human beings as biological. The human economy, therefore, needs to be understood as a complex interplay between human activity and the natural world. As we will see, this interplay, which includes key concepts such as environmental sustainability, can best be analyzed by a combination of evolutionary and physical principles.
A critical concept in connecting the economy and the natural world is the niche. In biology, a niche, in the simplest view, refers to the sets of resources available in the environment for survival and reproduction. Often, this is an environment that living beings actively construct and shape in order to access the resources necessary for their survival and reproduction, with corresponding consequences for cohabitating species. While animals like birds and beavers, as in our picture, engage in niche construction, humans do so on a much grander scale. How would a human niche look like?
Humans create an array of technological artifacts that enable us to transform our physical surroundings, in many cases improving the quality of life. Over time, the world of technology has grown to an unprecedented global scale, and its impact is now on a par with that of the biosphere. As the diagram shows, the sheer mass and intensity of physical and chemical transformations brought about by our technological advancements have given birth to what we now know as the technosphere. The new world of technology has enabled us to access and exploit resources that were previously beyond our reach, and has allowed us to make significant strides in areas such as transportation, communication, and medicine. However, it also brought new challenges and concerns, such as the depletion of human resources and the impact of pollution on human and animal health. But what exactly is the relationship between the technosphere and the economy?
We can address this question by the more general onion-like structure shown in the diagram. The primary means through which technology is developed and applied and resources are valued in view of their productive capacity are markets. Markets also, explicitly or implicitly, form the core of the economy in a wider sense, although they may of course be complemented by large-scale infrastructural and military efforts of political entities such as empires or nation-states. The central mechanism of markets is pricing, namely the assignment of monetary values to goods and services, which then determine their demand and supply. The key point now is that certain aspects of the environment are part of this mechanism, think of natural resources as commodities, whereas others are not, and therefore remain externalized. Think of the ecosystem services that we already mentioned in the previous chapter.
This gap between the internalized and externalized aspects of the environment has important implications for human life. For example, the depletion of natural resources or the degradation of ecological services can have severe consequences on human well-being, even if they are not reflected in the market prices. Another example is the impact of waste generated from economic activity, including greenhouse gas emissions and their effects on the Earth's climate. The market fails to recognize the environmental and social cost associated with these wastes, leading to a dysfunctional relationship between the technosphere and the biosphere.
In general, we see that the market is just one layer of the onion-like structure that includes the economy, the ecosystem, and the wider environment. The market operates within the rules and regulations of the economy. The economy, in turn, depends on the ecosystem, which provides the natural resources and services that sustain economic activities. The wider environment encompasses everything beyond the ecosystem, including social and cultural factors. Our theoretical approach aims to encompass all these layers and fully account for their interconnectedness.
To achieve this integration, let us first look into some fundamentals of physics. Thermodynamics is a branch of physics that deals with the relationship between heat, physical work, and energy. It provides a unified framework for analyzing flows of matter and energy using general physical laws that are applicable to all systems. Unfortunately, economics has mostly ignored these laws, as noted by Nicolas Georgescu-Roegen, one of the founding fathers of ecological economics more than 50 years ago.
Now, all economic activity and life on Earth more generally involves the consumption of energy and the performance of physical work. This means that any action, whether it be the movement of a car, the growth of a plant, or the circulation of blood in an animal's body, requires energy. The concept of work in thermodynamics refers to the transfer of energy from one system to another, or the conversion of energy from one form to another. This applies not only to human activities, but to any other dynamic phenomenon on Earth. For instance, wind blowing across a desert moves dust particles over long distances, which is also an example of physical work. But what are the sources of energy?
Well, when we look at the evolution of the human technosphere over the past 200 years or so, we see a heavy reliance on fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and gas. Those are non-renewable resources that are extracted from the earth. When burned, they release greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. A salient example is the production of our food. This takes place in a complex system, including agriculture, transportation, and food processing, all of which are heavily dependent on fossil fuels. Think of the petrol for transport, but also the production of fertilizers and pesticides used in agriculture are often made from fossil fuels.
However, from an Earth system perspective, fossil fuels are derived rather than primary energy source. The primary source is the continuous inflow of sunlight. This sunlight is utilized by plants to carry out photosynthesis, a process that produces energy carriers. When we consume meat, the animals we eat have previously consumed plants for their metabolic growth, and these plants themselves have harnessed the power of sunlight for their own survival and growth. Therefore, the energy we obtain from meat is ultimately derived from the sun. Fossil fuels essentially constitute decayed plants and organisms from a distant past that have been buried deep within the Earth's crust for millions of years. These fuels contain stored energy that was originally derived from sunlight. But eventually, of course, this storage can be depleted. Ultimately, therefore, the source of all life on Earth and human economic activity is the sun.
The sun's radiant energy is vital for sustaining life on Earth and drives numerous physical processes. It creates temperature differences which cause the movement of air molecules, thereby shaping global wind systems. These wind systems in turn influence various weather patterns and ocean currents across the planet. In essence, our planet can be viewed as a massive and intricate heat engine, powered by the inflow of solar energy, aiding to the energetic transformations in the inner Earth, such as volcanic eruptions and tectonic plate movements. The complex interplay between these energetic processes gives rise to the diverse landscapes, ecosystems, and climates that we see on our planet.
Besides energy, entropy is another key concept of thermodynamics. Energy is the capacity to do work, enabling physical systems to function and transform matter. Entropy, on the other hand, is a measure of the disorder or randomness of a system, and it is a byproduct of any physical work done. Entropy is also a form of energy that cannot be used to perform work. The diagram reproduces the previous Earth system diagram in a different format, highlighting these energy and entropy flows. In the most general sense, physical work stemming from energy inflows enables the creation and sustaining of states of higher complexity and order, be this a bird's nest, the organization of a market, or a functioning technological artifact. This works against the natural tendency of any life cycle towards disorder, senescence, death, and decay. Therefore, without a continuous inflow of solar energy, both the planetary engine and the human economy would eventually come to a halt. All stored energy resources would eventually be transformed into entropy, which cannot be used to do work. So the role of energy in driving the evolution of life on Earth cannot be overstated. How can we more specifically apply these principles to living systems?
Nearly a century ago, Alfred Lotka, a renowned biophysicist, formulated the principle of maximum power, which has since become a fundamental concept in biology and ecological economics. According to this principle, living systems strive to maximize power throughput that generates work to sustain their metabolism. Living organisms consume energy and material resources to enhance their growth and foster reproduction. This flow throughout throughput of life tends to achieve maximum values. However, at the same time, and by necessity, this implies that the generation of entropy in the form of diffusion and production of waste tends to reach a maximum as well. Hence, maximum power goes hand in hand with speeding up dissipation of energy, hence maximizing entropy production.
This universal tendency of living systems to grow will, of course, be restrained by the quantity and quality of available resources, such as food or water. In the context of growth of different populations in both the human and the non-human realm, a universal pattern of growth is observed in the form of the S-shaped logistic curve. In the early stages of growth, when resources are abundant, growth may be rapid and exponential. However, as a population approaches the limits of resource availability, i.e., the carrying capacity, growth begins to slow down and eventually reaches a plateau or dynamic steady state.
This concept of growth was a crucial element in economics' contribution to Darwin's theory of evolution. Darwin was heavily influenced by the works of Malthus, who had proposed that population growth outstrips the food supply, leading to competition and selection of the fittest. Darwin applied this idea to the natural world and explained that the pressure of selection is caused by the relentless growth of population across species.
This leads us to the theory of evolution. A basic well-known idea is that organisms that are better adapted to their environment will have a higher chance of survival and will be able to reproduce, passing on their advantageous traits to the offspring, the survival of the fittest principle. However, modern evolutionary theorism goes significantly beyond this principle. Species do not exist in isolation, but evolve in ecosystems where they interact and mutually depend on each other in ways that can improve their chances of survival. This is the principle of synergy. For example, predator-prey relationships ensure that the population of prey does not grow too large, which could lead to overgrazing and habitat destruction. At the same time, predators themselves are subject to selection pressures that shape their physical and behavioral traits. Another example of synergy in evolution is the productive use of wastes, such as decaying plants. Many species rely on decomposers to break down dead plant matter into nutrients that can be reused to other organisms, creating a cycle of growth and decay. This process is vital to maintaining the health and productivity of ecosystems. How can we integrate these points into the well-known ideas of selection and adaptation?
It is important to understand that adaptation is a complex concept, exhibiting different dimensions. First, when there is a mutation or innovation, it must harmonize with other relevant traits of the organism in order to ensure survival and growth. The related process is called internal selection. Conversely, external selection relates to the organism's external environment. This not only refers to optimization vis-à-vis a static environment in a technological sense, but also includes other competing organisms, which can lead to arms races or so-called red queen effects. An organism's fitness, therefore, is always relative. The complex interplay of internal and external selection leads to a multitude of evolutionary paths.
Niche construction can be seen in this context. As we have already seen, many organisms are not just passive recipients of their environment, but actively modify it to meet their needs. This in turn creates a feedback loop where the environment exerts selective pressure on the organisms, and the organisms in turn shape the environment. This dynamic understanding of a niche is crucial to the theory of evolution and fully in line with the concept of the technosphere that we had outlined earlier.
Despite the complex and intricate nature of evolution, the fundamental mechanisms outlined in Darwinian theory remain the same, namely variation, selection, and retention, or VSR. Variation refers to the generation of new forms, which in biology can be attributed to genetic processes such as mutation and recombination, but also can stem from behavioral novelty in the context of learning processes. Genetic variation is critical for the survival of species in changing environments. It creates new traits and features that can increase the chances of survival, such as the development of antibiotic resistance in bacteria.
Selection is a process of testing these new forms and eliminating those that are suboptimal, leaving only the most successful to be retained. It is through selection that the most successful traits are passed on to future generations. The most common forms are natural and sexual selection, corresponding to the multidimensionality of selection criteria that we have pointed out.
Retention refers to the preservation of successful forms, which can then be passed on to future generations. The successful traits that are retained can be genetic or cultural. In human societies, cultural retention occurs when successful ideas, beliefs, and practices are passed down from generation to generation.
Traditionally, these principles have been applied to genetic evolution only. However, in recent decades, scientists have developed theories of co-evolution and multi-level selection that allow for broader application of the VSR mechanism without implying genetic reductionism. For instance, evolutionary economists have applied this mechanism to market competition. Here, new firms can be regarded as variants, and market competition serves as a selective process that weeds out the suboptimal ones. The material organizational structures of the surviving firms retain new knowledge and skills, which help them remain successful in the long run. We will look at this conceptualization in more depth in Chapter 11.
A key concept in multi-level evolutionary theory is group selection. To better understand it, let's consider the case of humans. While we may appear to be individuals, we are actually a complex collection of organisms that includes the microbes living in our gut. This is true for all animals, which can be viewed as groups in terms of various mechanisms on different levels. Groups are emergent phenomena from evolutionary transitions, as for example in the case of the eukaryotic cell. How would that apply to the human realm?
The critical medium that differentiates one group from human individuals from another is culture. Culture is used in a very general sense here and refers to a group's shared beliefs, values, customs, and behaviors. Cultures that generate the ability to cooperate can be favored by selection, leading to a collective advantage in competition with other groups. This is because the capacity for cooperation allows groups to work together towards shared goals, such as finding food or defending against predators, which ultimately enhances the survival and reproduction success of the group as a whole. As we will discuss in more detail later, humans have achieved what is known as ultra-sociality, a level of social organization that is unparalleled among vertebrates. Ultra-sociality is in a large part due to our ability to create and share culture. Through culture, we are able to transmit information, norms, and values across generations, allowing us to build complex societies and cooperate on a massive scale. Interestingly, even individual altruism is supported by evolutionary selection groups that possess a culture of cooperation. This is because individuals who are willing to sacrifice their own interests for the benefit of the group are more likely to promote the survival and reproductive success of the group as a whole, thereby increasing the likelihood of passing on their genes to future generations.
We can generalize the case of group selection to co-evolution in the human realm, which involves both genetic and cultural transmission in combination with the construction of niches. As we have seen, humans have the unique ability to create artificial environments that improve their living conditions. By doing so, they create niches that positively select for their general capacity to create culture. This includes genetic evolution. A classic example is the genetic adaptation of human populations to digest milk, that is, lactose tolerance. This is a result of animal husbandry and the selective advantage accruing to societies that practice dairy farming. This adaptation has been shown to have occurred in several human populations independently, such as those of Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Humans shape their environments, but over time, environments shape humans as well, including in a biological fashion.
Culture is materially embodied not only in brains, but also in the artifacts that humans use in their daily lives. For example, pottery, clothing, and art are artifacts that embody cultural practices and beliefs. However, the most significant in the evolution of humans was the domestication of fire and the invention of cooking. Cooked food provided a more efficient source of energy. This, in turn, freed up time and energy that could be used to develop the brain's resources and social behaviors, ultimately leading to the ultra-sociality of the human species that we have already mentioned. The social brain hypothesis is supported by research showing that social interaction is crucial for the development of the brain.
Finally, let us offer some first reflections on the role of institutions for co-evolution in the human realm, a topic that we will look at in much more detail in Chapter 9. Institutions refer to the formal and informal rules, norms, and practices that govern how individuals and groups behave. They enable complex coordination of behavior, facilitating cooperation and collective action. Institutions can take many different forms, including legal systems, political institutions, and social norms. They can be formal, such as laws, regulations, or informal, such as social norms and traditions. Crucially, institutions are not just external constraints on individual behavior, they are also internalized by individuals and become part of their identity. This internalization can lead individuals to comply with institutional norms and rules, even when enforcement mechanisms are weak or absent.
The transmission of institutions is a complex process that involves various mechanisms, including beliefs, ideologies, education, and enforcement. Individuals learn about institutions through socialization, education, and exposure to cultural practices and norms. Over time, institutions can become deeply ingrained in a society's collective consciousness, shaping how individuals think, feel, and behave.
To make this more concrete, let us return to the example of dairy farming and milk production. The knowledge and skills required for the practice are passed down through institutions such as family farms, agricultural schools, and government regulations. VSR mechanisms work effectively at both the individual and group level. At the individual level, selection operates based on an individual's traits, for example, lactose tolerance. On the group level, selection operates based on the collective traits of a group. For example, the ability to cooperate in an effective organization of farming. Overall, institutions and the VSR mechanisms are complementary mechanisms to genetic evolution, ensuring the effective transmission and selection of advantageous traits across generations.
Let us now summarize our main takeaways. Our first major insight was that the human economy is an integral part of the Earth system, which fully relies on solar energy as the primary source of energy. The Earth system needs to be understood as a complex interplay between human activity and the natural world, the technosphere and the biosphere. Market pricing can lead to a dysfunctional relationship between the two realms, manifested in negative externalities. The thermodynamics of open evolutionary systems states that evolution tends towards maximizing flow throughputs. This is the maximum power theory. This principle applies on all levels, from the Earth system to the human economy, and it explains why evolution goes hand in hand with growth.
We then turn to evolutionary theory as the main theoretical framework for understanding living systems, including humans and human groups. In applying evolutionary theory, we posited both ontological continuity, referring to the embeddedness of human life in other ecosystems, and a formal homology across different domains with respect to key mechanisms of evolution, in particular, variation, selection, and retention. From an evolutionary viewpoint, human beings are living systems with ultra-sociality, of which markets are a core manifestation.
We then stressed that evolutionary processes are synergetic and operate on different levels, in particular biological and cultural. However, across the levels, the same general type of mechanisms apply in causal analysis: variation, selection, and retention, VSR. Selection is triggered and shaped by emergent scarcity in the growth of living systems. It is multidimensional, with a complex and evolving interplay of selection criteria. The standard biological example is sexual versus natural selection, the former of which can be generalized to the human realm in the form of arms races and red queen effects.
The human economy evolves via interaction between biological and cultural and institutional evolution, with ultra-sociality conditioning a special role of group selection. The market is a special institutional form of social organization emergent from cultural evolution that allows for the expansion of the division of labor beyond biological constraints. though operating according to homologous evolutionary principles.
This concludes our exposition of the integration of economics in the natural sciences. The next two chapters will directly build on this exposition by first taking a deeper look at one key manifestation of human ultra-sociality, namely cooperation and specialization, and second, analyzing production and technological evolution as key manifestations of the technosphere. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.